Limited access to books is only part of the reason for summer reading loss. Students are often assigned a book to read over the summer that is either too difficult or too easy. Without books that can be read easily with good comprehension, less skilled readers will not improve. Likewise, higher achieving readers will be bored and become complacent of books that are too easy. Providing children with books that match their skill levels and their interests is an important first step in encouraging voluntary reading. For more information regarding matching students to books, Laurie Lee from our Just Read Florida office recently interviewed Dr. Malbert Smith, co-founder of MetaMetrics. Let's take a listen.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Laurie Lee, and I'm with the Just Read Florida office. Today on Teacher Talk, we're here with Dr. Malbert Smith, and we're just really grateful to have him with us. And so he's going to visit with us a little bit about MetaMetrics, the company that he's with, and that has been a tremendous support to our students and our teachers throughout Florida. So welcome. Thank you for being with us today.
Well, it's a pleasure, and thanks for the invitation.
Oh, well, great. Well, just to start off, could you just share a little bit with us regarding the Lexile measure, what exactly Lexiles are and how they're determined?
Good. Great questions. We developed Lexiles back in the 80s. We were actually funded by the National Institute of Health to build the Lexile framework. We were very fortunate. We had 5 grants. And the simplest way to think about the Lexile framework is from 2 perspectives, so you can bifurcate it. One perspective is a measure of readability. How difficult is a book or an article to read? So it's a readability formula at one hand. On the other hand, it is also a measure of one's reading ability. So just like we can measure a book and give it a Lexile measure, we can also measure students and have their reading score expressed as a Lexile reading measure as well, thereby allowing us to match readers to books and support differentiated instruction. So we've measured hundreds of thousands of books. All the publishers send us their books, and we measure them. What we're looking for on the text complexity side is the semantic and syntactic load of the book. How difficult are the vocabulary words? How difficult is the syntactic structure? The higher the Lexile measure, the more difficult something is to read. The lower the Lexile, the easier it is to read. Likewise, we measure students by linking an existing test to the Lexile scale. And in your state, the Florida Assessment for Instruction in Reading reports out Lexile. So you have an assessment that reports out Lexiles, and they can use those scores to connect to books. And in addition to books, we've measured hundreds of millions of articles. So almost any article from Ranger Rick to Scientific America, the article has been Lexiled. And I think in your state maybe use Gale and ProQuest and EBSCO in terms of your library databases, and they have all those articles Lexiled as well.
That's great. Can you share with us a little bit about how Lexile is different than perhaps an age level recommendation or a grade level recommendation on a book?
A great question. And you have to pay attention to a number of features when you're trying to match a student to a book. But what the Lexile framework pays attention to is the difficulty of the book and the reader's ability. It does not pay attention, for example, to age appropriateness. So that's one feature that the parent, the teacher needs to pay, or the librarian or the media specialist needs to pay attention to, because there could be a book, let's take Catcher in the Rye, that has a Lexile measure, and a student at the 3rd grade or 4th grade may have the reading ability to read that book, but it may not be developmentally appropriate or age appropriate for that student. So you still need to pay attention to a number of features like that when you're matching a student to a book.
And thank you for making that point, because that's so very important that we pay attention both to content and also the difficulty level of the text.
You know, and in workshops that we do sometimes, I even talk about the jacket art of the book that you need to look at, because that's a feature that when students are choosing a book that you have to pay attention to as well.
Thank you. Now we know, and you mentioned, that our teachers in Florida can obtain a Lexile level from the Florida Assessments for Instruction in Reading. Are there other ways that they can obtain Lexiles for their students?
Yes, there are a number of tests that report out Lexiles, and a number of your districts in Florida use a number of those assessments. For example, Scholastic, any of your districts that use a product called Read 180, which is a reading intervention program. Any of your programs or any of your districts that use Scholastic Reading Counts, any of your districts, and I know Miami, because I was there not too long ago, they use Achieve 3000 in Kid Biz and Teen Biz, and the backbone of those products have Lexiles in them as well. But there are a number. I will use the term, we're ecumenical. We work with all the test publishers, so from Harcourt to Pearson to CTB, McGraw-Hill. We don't have a test ourselves. What we have built is the Lexile scale. Our position, my position is, and my firm is a psychometric research firm. We work with assessments. And I think in our country, we have enough assessments. What we need to do more with are the assessment results that go home to parents and teachers. And so I don't think the world needs 3 more new tests. We have plenty of tests. What we need to have from those tests is more actionable information so that teachers and parents can do things with those test scores when they go home. And I think in that respect, in your state, the FAIR has lots of wonderful feedback reports for teachers and parents, and I think does a really good job there.
Oh, thank you. We're very pleased with FAIR and excited that it provides the information both to teachers and to our parents, so we're excited about that. When students receive a Lexile level, and teachers may use the Scholastic tool or the FAIR, sometimes they may use both of those tools, and they may get quite a different measure. Can you share with us, why that might occur, and then which one is right?
Exactly. Good question. I had a statistics professor in grad school who had a quote from Mark Twain, and I think the quote goes something like this. Mark Twain said, "A man with 2 watches never knows for sure what time it is." And I suspect if I ask you to look at your watch now and I looked at my watch, we may have different times. It may be a few minutes off, or I could be on Central Standard Time because I could have flown in here from another part of the country. We know that every measurement has some uncertainty of measurement in it. The test scores are not infallible. We all know that sometimes we have good days, sometimes we have bad days. I had a little bit of test anxiety the other day, and that I had to go back and get my driver's license renewal, and there's some anxiety attached to that. So what we have with every assessment is a sample of behavior, which we are making an inference about their reading ability. And so if you have 2 different instruments that report out 2 different Lexile measures, there are a couple of things you can do. One is you can look to see, does one have a higher reliability, and you could give more credence to that one. Number 2, thing that I often recommend is you just average the 2 measures. If you take the same test, and I don't care what test it is, if you take the same test 2 days in a row, you'll get 2 different scores. And I'll give you one personal story about this. My son, who now is a college freshman, signed up to take the College Board SAT and the ACT his junior and senior year in high school. And I suggested to him, I said to my son, that I said, your sisters, I probably never should have said that, took a little bit of a test prep class, and I would love for you to do that. And he said, "Oh, Dad, I don't need to do that." He said, "I'll show up, take the test, I'll be fine." And I said, "Well, have you ever looked at there are released test items you could look at?" "Oh, Dad, I don't need to waste my time with that. You spent too much money on my sisters, I'll be fine, I'll take the test, I'll be fine." About 3 weeks later, test scores come home, we're at dinner. He opens up his envelope and he says, "Dad, we did not get what we wanted." And I laughed and I said, "What's the we here?" But he said, "There's good news." And I said, "What's the good news?" And the good news is, he reported back to me, there was a little section on this test, and he took the ACT and the College Board SAT, and it said, "What will happen if you take the test again?" And he read it to me, and he said, "Dad, it says if I take it again, I have a 63 or 64% chance that my score will be higher. I have a 30% chance my score will be the same, and I have only a 6% chance it will be lower." He said, "Dad, let's just roll the dice and do it again." And I laughed. I said, "Well, Mally, the reason why it's lower, it's called regression to the mean," and I got into some statistical terms. But that shows you there that here's a test that he sat for 3 hours on one Saturday morning, and it says basically if you take it again tomorrow, you only have like a 6% chance of scoring the same score and there's a 94% chance it's either going to be higher or lower. So I think one of the things that we have to recognize is that every test is a snapshot, and there's some uncertainty, and the more we can aggregate across those assessments, the more confidence we can have in where that student is. But there is some volatility in that because of the uncertainty of measurement.
That's really helpful information. I know it will be for our teachers that have received some of these Lexiles that are a little bit different, so
Right.
help them to use that information. So thank you for clarifying that. Can you share a little bit about how Lexiles can be used to support our students in the classroom and also out?
Yes. Well, I think the first part, inside the classroom, there's so much heterogeneity in any classroom. If you take a 5th grade classroom, there's a tremendous reading range within a normal 5th grade classroom. And often that one textbook is just right for a slice of the students, but it could be too difficult for some, or it could be too easy for some of the students. And teachers that use the Lexile framework and media specialists that use the Lexile framework recognize that diversity of reading ability within a group and use the Lexile framework to help find additional ancillary material, supportive material that supports the textbook. For example, I know in classrooms, like in the 10th grade, often a topic is photosynthesis out of the biology textbook. And often what teachers will do, or media specialists, is they'll actually go into the library resources, either EBSCO or Gale or any of these content aggregators, and they will actually key in the keyword photosynthesis, but then they'll have Lexile ranges trying to find material for every student to read about the topic at hand. So often, and I wouldn't say this happens in Florida, but other states, a teacher will do what I call the Pontius Pilate. They will wipe their hands and say, I'm not a reading teacher, I teach biology, and unfortunately, the student's not reading the textbook because maybe it's too hard, and they're not getting content, nor are they reading, two things we want to promote in school. So the Lexile framework is a tool, a resource that can help for those students inside that classroom. Outside the classroom, one of the things that your state is taking a lead on is, and I think so exciting, is the whole area of summer loss, summer slide, summer fade. The phenomena that we know and again, it depends on which research you read. The terms are used interchangeably, but what basically the phenomena is saying is that many of our students, and in particular our low-income students, go home during the summer to what I call text-free zones. There are no books, there are no magazines, and so we get all students growing during the school year, but then for our low-income students, they go home to these text-free environments, and while the more affluent students are continuing to read and grow their reading skills, those low-income kids slide or fade or lose ground over the summer. So we get all students growing during the school year, then the low-income go home during the summer. In fact, a number of researchers at Hopkins now are arguing that up to 2/3 of the achievement gap that we're trying to mitigate against can be explained by 12 contiguous summers where we turn off the educational spigot for our low-income students. So you have a very aggressive and a very targeted campaign to promote reading throughout the year, and in particular in the summer, and using a resource, Find a Book, and with the FAIR reporting out Lexiles, you can use the Find a Book to help students connect to books. The summer loss is a reality, and what we have to do is to be creative and use empirical methods to try to combat that phenomena. And the best research on this has been done by a Harvard professor, James Kim, who actually has an I3 grant now to replicate a number of the studies he's been doing. But what he found is that, okay, summer loss is a reality, but he also found that we could do something about it. And here's what he found. Punch points are this. If we can allow students to select books that, A, they're interested in. So if I just get you books and I say, here, read this book, but you're not interested in it. It's summer. You're not going to read the book. But if we can pay attention to interest level, so first interest level, then second consideration he said that he found that we needed to pay attention to was the difficulty of the book and the reading ability of the student. If I give you books that you're very interested in, but they're so hard for you, you could disengage from it. Likewise, if I give you books that A, you're interested in, but they're so easy for you, you're probably not going to be exposed to new vocabulary, new syntactic structures. So for optimal growth, if we can pay attention to interest level and matching reader ability to text complexity of the book, then what he found, the effect sizes were equivalent to going to summer school. So allowing students to self-select books that A, they're interested in, B, at their reading level, maximizes the learning opportunity for them. And so your Find a Book resource allows you to do that. As you go on that resource, it's a pull-down menu. You click on the grade you're in. Then the next screen is interest genres. So you could be interested in science fiction, novels and mysteries. I could be in the 5th grade with you, but I'm interested in sports and name 3 other topics, so I click on what I'm interested in. Now what the Find a Book does, the resource, it searches through hundreds of thousands of books, and you get a targeted reading list. I get a targeted reading list at my reading level, at your reading level, and then the next screen over, you can actually see the closest public library from where you're sitting, so it connects those test scores to books to the public library, and each student has a personalized, customized reading list. And I think what you're doing in your state is so important, because if we're going to really do something and eradicate this achievement gap, we have to extend learning time outside the 180 days of the school. And this is such a cost-effective way because the public libraries exist. FAIR is already available for students, and Find a Book, the resource, is completely free as well.
And we thank you so much for your support with the Find a Book. It's really a great help to our students, especially throughout the summer. What about our kids that perhaps don't have a Lexile level? Is it possible for them to use Find a Book?
Yes, great question. We didn't want, because for that to be a showstopper. If a student or parent goes to this website and they couldn't find their test score, or they didn't know what the test score was, we didn't want that to restrict the use of it. So what we do in that case is we again ask you for what grade you're in, but then there's a simple question we ask. We ask, are you reading, are your textbooks at the 3rd grade easy, hard, or just right? It's basically what we ask. And so you click on that. And if we know what grade you're in, and we know whether you're having difficulty reading the books at your grade level, we can estimate where we think the match is between you as a reader and the difficulty of the book. And so we make that estimation. So it's not a requirement that you have that at all. We think it's better to have it than not have it, but it's not a requirement.
Well, that's terrific. What would your guidance be to teachers and parents in regard to using Lexile levels? Should students only read the materials that fall within their Lexile levels, or is it possible or appropriate at times that they would reach beyond or below those levels?
That's a very good question as well, because, and that's today, I know your state has adopted the Common Core State Standards, and you're part of the PARC consortium in terms of the 2 testing consortia. And the real challenge, we worked in the Common Core State Standards, and what we found, and what I'm going to describe to you now, is in Appendix A of the Common Core State Standards. And what we found is that the K-12 text complexity continuum over the last 50 years, and we went back and reviewed Gene Shaw's work from the 70s, Hayes' work from 90s, Gary Williamson from the 2008, and then some additional studies that we had been commissioned to do. And what we found is that students' diet, if you will, of what they're reading in terms of the textbooks over the last 50 years has gotten easier. Over that same 50 years, the text complexity of what you will have to read in college and in the workplace has gotten harder. So there's about a 170, 200 Lexile gap between the normal diet of what a student would receive in the K-12 environment and what they'll have to read outside of when they graduate in June and enroll in college in August. And that's why I think we have so many students that end up in, euphemistically, what we call developmental education in the community colleges and colleges, and it's always reading, writing, and math are the 3 that they go into. So paying attention to the diet of what students are reading. Also, I'll mention this, Neil Duke did a reanalysis of some of the Pearls data, and what she found is that those countries that were outperforming us in reading, one of the differentiating factors was those students in other countries were reading a higher % of nonfiction text. So 2 punch points here is we have to pay attention to the diet of what students are reading, and we need to have students stretch. So when you were saying should they just read in their Lexile zone, inside the Common Core State Standards in Appendix A, there's a staircase of the Lexile levels by grade level to ensure you're going to be college and career ready if you're reading at that level. So they recommend, and we recommend, that we do stretch our students. And that's where I think librarians and media specialists have such an important role, because they can help students continue to grow on things they're interested in and challenge them with more difficult material so that we're constantly getting them to grow. Likewise, when students find something they're very interested in, never should the Lexile framework restrict them from reading that. We want students reading, and reading is always good. There are optimal ways that we can match, and we talked earlier this afternoon about age appropriateness and a lot of features you have to pay attention to. But we want students reading, and if we can let them, at least especially during the summer, combat this summer loss by letting them self-select books they're interested in and be at their reading level, it just optimizes the effects of their growth over the summer period.
Well, thank you. Appreciate your guidance on that, and absolutely agree we need to be challenging our students more and more and providing the support they need along the way, but absolutely stretching them to where they need to be.
Right.
This is my final question this afternoon. If parents and teachers want to learn more about Lexiles and more about MetaMetrics, where do they need to go? A website, or what resources are available?
We have at our website, it's www.lexile.com, and there's parent resources, there are teacher resources there, and school administrator resources. We have a number of our, there's a research section there where you can drill deeper on any of the topics we've talked about today, from measurement uncertainty to vertical scales to more applications like Find a Book that we've talked about today, vocabulary resources, things like that as well. But everything can be found at lexile.com, and in terms of the background and also tools and resources as well.
Great. Well, thanks again for being here this afternoon. We appreciate your support of our students in Florida. Thank you for your literacy support of our teachers and our kids.
Thank you.
Okay. I hope you'll take advantage of the Find a Book program and other great resources that are available on the FLDOE website, and we thank you for joining us today.